So we talked about last week, or maybe last week or the week before, we talked about our predictions, and we
Hmm.
were talking about how Apple's going to have to do something with the Apple Watch in order to make it in worthy enough of people upgrading. They kind of didn't do that last with the Apple 7.
Hmm.
They just made the screen just a little bit bigger. But we talked about how sensors, you mentioned even in your predictions that Apple's going to do some sort of glucose, blood
Hmm.
pressure, something. And you talked about how they'll have to do it in the actual band. They're going to have
Hmm.
to make the band compress or do something. It'll be more than just the sensors on the back of the
On the
watch
back of the watch, yeah.
in order to do something like monitor blood levels or whatever the case may be. Well, it looks like patents that were awarded to Apple include a strap or a band that embeds circuitry into the woven materials that could, for
Hmm.
example, make a future Apple Watch band provide many advantages over current bands, like adding audio, tactile input, and more. The more it could include temperature sensors, pressure sensors, force, gas, moisture, capacitive sensors, gesture sensors, image and proximity sensors. So think of all this in a fancy band that when you put the band on, it could detect proximity, it could detect moisture in the air, and it could do pressure sensors like again the whole thing that you were mentioning a couple
You
weeks
can
ago,
have the cuff blood
and
pressure
it
monitor.
tighten up, or
Hmm.
it senses the additional pressure, and that gives you what you need to measure your blood glucose. So again, patents are just patents. Apple could have been doing these patents to make sure that nobody else does it
Nobody else
first,
does it. Yep.
or they could actually have plans to include those in future releases. What if they did come out with a band that you could buy that could monitor blood glucose or measure moisture, proximity, touch? You could actually use it to swipe and do different things maybe on your screen. That would probably, of course, they would have to say only compatible with Apple Watch Series 8.
Hmm.
But
Or above.
but if they did that, that may be what people would do, or that may be what people would need to actually update from like a 6 or maybe even a 7 that people bought last year. So I just want to get your input on, do you think this will actually come to pass and Apple actually create a product, or you think this is just Apple protecting their IP?
I think will actually come to pass. What I'm not so sure about, these are a lot of sensors. So I'm not sure how many they can put in one band. And it may be the thought process to put the certain sensors together on certain bands. So maybe put two or three sensors on one band for people who may be diabetic, or put sensors on one set of band for people who have high blood pressure. But I can't see them putting all of this in one band. And it may be one of the things where they consult medical professionals to kind of see which ones go best together. And then having kind of like the swiping feature, I think that may just be a band by itself. But I
Right.
definitely see this coming to fruition. And that's why, when we talked about the predictions, that's why I thought that the sensors would have to be on the band, because I do have a blood pressure cuff, and you
Okay.
just put it on your wrist and press the start button, and it starts, it tightens, it takes your heart rate and the pressure. And of course, you can get your heart rate from your wrist. And so it just really just kind of made sense for it to go into the band, because there's nowhere else for these sensors to go. Maybe a couple more sensors can go on the watch itself. Maybe the moisture, maybe magnetic, but I don't see a bunch of these that are going to be able to fit on the watch itself. So they have to go somewhere. So the band was, to me, the next logical explanation.
Okay. All right. Yeah, definitely. There's only so much they can do with the actual hardware piece on the actual watch. So, especially, I think what I would want Apple to do is at the very least do the blood pressure one, because that would go a long way for a lot of people who suffer
And the
from
glucose
high
for high
and the
blood pressure
glucose
and
and
diabetes.
diabetes.
Those are
Yeah,
two huge,
right,
huge medical conditions that I think would probably, and maybe those two will go on together. I'm not sure,
right,
but
right,
those are two that I think they should definitely, you know, add at least in the first iteration. And do I think all of these will come out at the same time? No. I think they'll
right.
roll them out as features, get developed. But definitely,
And
I
even
think
if they
just those
split them
ones.
out, the high blood pressure will be one, and blood
Mm-hmm.
glucose will be another one.
Yeah.
There are enough people that who have those concerns that would more than pay for them versus the way that they normally have to manage their high blood
Yeah.
pressure,
Yeah.
normally have to measure their blood glucose. You got the things that people stick on the back of their arms that they got to
The
keep,
little
eat
the
the
yeah, the
little
pat
patch.
they have
And that
patches
and
and
that
the
and that's the
yeah,
new school thing,
yeah.
previously, and people
You
are
have to
probably
prick your
still doing
finger.
it. Got to prick your finger. The people who have adopted technology, they've got the patch where they can take their
Phone and
phone
just
and
scan
stick
over the
it
thing.
right. But imagine if you didn't have to do that. If you could just look at your wrist, press a button or two, it do the measurement, and then that would give you a better indicator on
Yeah.
your current health. People would pay out the nose for that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And Charles says in the chat he was like a glucose monitor would be an instant sell for his wife. So you got one already. And I think that would make it easier for a lot of people, especially kids, because there are a lot of, what is it, type 1 or type 2? I can confuse diabetic kids that have to have the sensor on them. But I think you must have to like get it surgically on you or something. I don't know. Don't get me lying
Well,
how it works, but I think
right.
it would be more convenient and improve the quality of life, especially of older folks and children, that they'll be able to have some freedom to move around and not necessarily have to, have a whole separate thing kind of put on them.
Right.
They'll just have it on their watch, which they're probably already wearing anyway.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.